Good evening, Facebook. Welcome to Straight Up Talk with Earl Rush. And this evening, we have a different format than we usually do. Tonight, we'll have a panel that will be discussing the legend Ray Barretto. On our panel will be the author of the book, Robert Theis. We will have Ronald Vázquez, one of the translators. We'll have my dear friend, Bella Martínez, in charge of the translation of this book and independent publisher, along with my co-host, Eileen Torres. So we're going to get to our panel tonight, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the show.
Okay, well, I'll begin. And as I begin, I want to make it known to the audience that my Spanish is marginal, so I will not be embarrassing myself in public. But I want to give the audience an idea of who Robert Theis is. This is a man that needs to be recognized around the world for his work. He is a journalist. He is a radio and television announcer and a producer. He has dedicated himself to the research of Afro-Caribbean music and the dissemination of that information to all of us who love that genre. For 8 years, as a seasoned interviewer and personality, Robert has hosted the program Conversando la Salsa on Radio Nacional de Colombia, and it broadcasts to 57 stations in that country. He has worked as a musical consultant, and he delivers lectures on the appreciation and understanding of the salsa genre. He's also the author of another book, Willie Rosario, El Rey del Ritmo. And we welcome Robert because this is such an honor to have a man with such a distinguished background and such a passion for the music to share his knowledge with us. I, who know a little bit about it, but learned so much from him and his research.
Right.
So, Bella, do you want to tell him what I said, please?
Sí, claro. Queremos dejarle saber a la audiencia que mi español no está a la par con lo que sería lo que se quiere decir aquí, pero queremos asegurarnos de que nuestra audiencia sepa quién es Robert Theis. Agradecemos a Robert Theis por estar de acuerdo y estar aquí con nosotros en este espacio que le compartimos los resultados de su investigación exhaustiva. Nosotros agradecemos profundamente que nos haya donado de su tiempo y nos haya traído acceso a la historia de Barretto y a su legado artístico. Esta es nueva información para la gran mayoría del público anglohablante. Estamos profundamente agradecidos de tener aquí con nosotros, además de a Robert Theis, a el traductor puertorriqueño Ronald, para el beneficio de la audiencia, y de Bella Martínez, que está haciendo su segunda incursión aquí. Yo voy a estar interpretando, yo soy Bella Martínez y voy a estar interpretando al tiempo. Eileen trae a colación que Robert Theis es periodista, radiodifusor, comunicador de televisión y productor. Ha dedicado gran parte de su vida a la búsqueda y a la investigación de la música afrocaribeña. Durante 8 años, esta personalidad de radio, veterano por más de 20 años, por los últimos 8 años, Robert ha dirigido y ha estado en el programa Conversando la Salsa de Radio Nacional de Colombia, que transmite en 57 estaciones. Debo corregir que no son 8 años, sino 12. Trabaja como consultor musical y da charlas sobre salsa y temas de apreciación de la música. Él también es el autor del libro Willy Rosario, el ritmo, además del libro de Ray Barretto, Fuerza Gigante, que fue su primer libro en 2016. Willy Rosario, el rey del ritmo, es su más reciente libro, este se publicó en 2019. Le damos la más cordial bienvenida a Robert, pero debo añadir además, para los que no escucharon al principio la bienvenida, que el Máster Conguero de la noche, ¿verdad? Es el nombre de moda, es Bobby Allende. Creo que a Earl se le va a presentar. Adelante.
Okay. The first question is actually going to go to Ronald because I've seen your name on 2 major works. You look pretty young.
Yeah.
And you have this great body of work behind you. And I'm wondering how long you've been doing this, how you got the gig, and how many of these gigs have been presented to you.
Okay, well, first off, I'm 23 years old, and I've only done 2 translations so far. Both this Ray Barretto book and the previous work I did was Jimmy Morales' memoir that Bea Martínez also wrote. So I've basically been doing translations for around a year. Started after school, and when Bea Martínez first approached me for Jimmy Morales' translation. And so, yeah, 23, and I've been translating for pretty much a year now.
That's tremendous. You've got a great future in front of you. And Bella, I'm going to ask you how you came to know Robert and how you were able to collaborate on this tremendous work.
So, I didn't know Robert, but I knew the work. And I wanted to, when I first got the book in my hands, I thought it makes sense for this book to be in English because Ray Barretto has so many followers in the English-speaking community. Ray Barretto was born and raised in English, and this is an academic work. It is a journalistic document, and it's so carefully put together. But it was in Spanish, so it pained me that Ray Barretto was not going to be available to my friends in the US of A. That although have Puerto Rican and Latin roots, they're because let me tell you, they're more Puerto Ricans. They feel those roots way more than those of us who live in Puerto Rico. So the roots and the pride there, but they don't have command of the language enough to read. I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them, especially the salsa dancers that I love, the musicians that, I mean, they were born and raised in a different language. I mean, it's nobody's fault. So I thought, well, it makes sense to put that book in English, but I didn't know Robert. And those of you who know me, actually, all of you know me very well. Bobby knows me. Ronald, you, Eileen, you know me from a long time ago. So I don't take a no for an answer. But I was very cautious about how to approach Robert with the question. So a few years go by, and I don't know him. But I was last year during the pandemic, I was writing Jimmy Morales' book. So for the journalistic portion of the work, like I needed some press releases and some press documents. So I asked Jimmy, hey, do you have any journalist friend that I can, approach for the newspapers and promo. Although I hired a public relations person, it's not the same. I mean, in the journalistic community, you have to have context, and you have to have, it's just like the musicians. Musicians speak a different language amongst themselves. You can't talk to musicians like they talk amongst their groups. So Jimmy said, "Yeah, I know Robert." I said, "Oh, really? You know Robert? Can I talk to him? Can you give me his number?" He said, "Well, I gotta talk to him first. I mean, I don't know if you're gonna want me to give you the number." I'm like, "Okay." So several months go by, and so I'm now here having a two-pronged act. One of the questions was, "Can you help me with the press for Jimmy's book?" Then and I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that became the second priority, because I was already having the little devil jumping on my head, reminding me of the Baretto book. I'm like, this is the author of the Baretto book. Now or never. I mean, but then how do I approach? Because he would have had all the right to tell me, no, this is my book, it's my work, I own it, and I don't authorize anybody to translate it. And he would have been in his right. So I was trying to see how to get into the proposal. But to answer your question, your first question, Jimmy Morales introduced us. And as soon as I started to toy with the idea of the translation, I was thinking, oh my God, Jimmy loves Baretto. So this is also going to make me so happy that in the presentations, I'm going to drag Jimmy along, because I'm going to need a Master Conguero to talk about Congos, because I am not a Conguero. So I thought for the presentation, I was going to need a Conguero. So who better than Jimmy? So I was like, he's gonna tell me yes, but I kept it a secret. Unfortunately, Jimmy died, and although the book was almost finished, I never told him, because it was going to be a surprise, and the surprised one was me, with him departing so soon. But I'm so blessed that every conguero that I've asked for assistance, either for the translation or for the presentations, had to be obviously at Jimmy's level or higher, and had to have Barretto as a reference. So that's how I came about. I know I answered a little bit longer than you asked, but that's how I came about to go and approach Bobby Allende. And, yeah, I know, Bobby, what a scammer I am.
All right.
Well,
All right.
Earl's been researching Bobby Allende and his fabulous career. So, Earl, why don't you introduce this Ghetto in Our Presence?
Okay. I have been researching Mr. Allende, and wow, what a fabulous resume!
Thank you.
He's played with. He's done a lot of good things. He started ever since he was 3 years old. But let me play a clip for you. Let me play a clip for you that I have.
I'm almost afraid.
You're gonna like this one. You're gonna like
I know how you feel.
guys. After you see this, you'll know.
This guy, he's really outside. He don't waste it. He's so good. Together they do a challenge thing, and then they play it. They're really marvelous. So
I heard them in rehearsal. They're two little geniuses.
Yeah, really.
Genius, that is.
I hate them both.
Yeah. How long have you been playing, Bobby?
Since I was 3 years old.
6 years.
3.
3? No, I know, but see, but you're 9 now, right? So you've been playing for 6 years. That's what I meant. Who brought you the first set of drums that you?
Oh, my uncle.
Your uncle. Huh? Same for you, Tito?
Yes.
Yeah? Tito looked at me when I was his age. Would you like to do something with, you want to do something for us now? Okay?
Yeah.
You feel calm and collected and all together? Okay. Let's go. Tito, Eileen. Don't play too good. That's good. Ready?
Now, I'm old school. Now, I don't know if you know how amazing it was for this young man and his brother to be on the Mike Douglas show at this time of, in that time, in that era.
Absolutely.
With Freddie Pins when he was in his height. This young man had to be very talented. It's not too much more than I need to tell you. I mean, when he was 10 years old, when he was young, he performed on stage. Tito Puente asked him to come on stage and play. He later on became a musical director for Mark Anthony, La India, and Willie Colon. I mean, I'm so honored to have this young man on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Allende. Bobby Allende.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, man.
Thank you
It's
for
all right.
coming on the show, sir.
No, thank you for the invite. And since Bea did corner me, to go, no, but she didn't have to twist my arm very much. It's a no-brainer. I'm a true believer. I've always learned from my grandparents and my mom that what you've been given, you should always pay it forward twice. And I try to do that as much as I can within my circle or within whatever I have. And at times I try to go beyond. Sometimes I find myself trying to give something I don't even have. Okay. But I just try to find a way to give it because it's the way to be. There's no room in life in general for egos, and insecurities and stuff like that. It gets you nowhere really fast, and it's what I've learned. I've always learned that from home. And like I always preach, everything starts at home. And good thing I was surrounded by great people. And at the same time, I was surrounded by in a negative area during my upbringing. As Freddie Prinze said in that show, Freddie Prinze was brought up 2 blocks away from where I was brought up. He was brought up on 157th, and I was brought up on 155th.
Wow! So
we were basically brought up neighbors. And if anyone knew that neighborhood back in that time, knew it was a very powerful drug-infested area. So I had a choice. I had a choice, and thankfully, so that between music and my parents, they drove me in the right direction. And I'm proud to say, and I don't take it. I'm not throwing it in anyone's face, and I don't look down on anyone. But I'm proud to say I've never used drugs. I don't smoke. I don't drink, and I'm 55 years old. And that in my profession, that's a really a hard thing to do, especially traveling the world. And many trips I've done to Colombia, South America, and all these other places where it's practically like an appetizer, sort of say. But I thank God that the willpower that God instilled inside me, that I was able to uphold it and maintain it. And for that, if anything, if nothing else, I'm most grateful for it. Because I tell people, in life, you don't have to be told to learn. All you have to do is look and learn. and learn from others' mistakes and ask yourself if that's what you want to be or not, for that matter. You know, so that's the route I try to go in, and I try to pass that on. You know, when the younger generation asks me for any type of advice or anything like that, you know, I try to be as positive, although there's a lot of negative in this industry as well as there's positive. But I try to take the high road and go the positive route. So it'll give them that strength and that vision to go that route and maintain in the right direction on the right route.
Beautiful.
You know?
Beautiful. Well, let me ask you this, Mr. I don't want to butcher your names.
You can call me Bobby. It's fine.
Bobby.
Robert, if you're gonna write me a check.
Well, it looks like okay. Bobby, let me ask you, how did Mr. Baretto play an influence on your career, on your life?
You know, earlier in my day, there was a thing that they used to be called the Jazzmobile. The Jazzmobile was a truck with a mobile stage. On that Jazzmobile had a schedule that would come out monthly, and people would look on the schedule to see who's going to be on that stage. The irony of the Jazzmobile was that it went to different neighborhoods. It went to Harlem, it went to Lower East Side, it went to the Bronx, it went to Upper Manhattan, Washington. It moved around. That's why it was called the Jazzmobile. On that Jazzmobile, you got to see Mongo Santa Maria, Tito Puente, Dizzy Gillespie, Ray Barretto. The who's of who's played on the Jazzmobile, and people from that genre, from that era, they know. If you mention Jazzmobile, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You got to see the creme of the creme on that mobile. And I got to see Baretto a few times on there as a kid. And of course, a place called the Corso, the home of the Latin music. It was on 86th Street, 3rd Avenue. I got to play there as well. I used to do shows on Wednesdays at 1:30 in the morning with Tito Puente at the Corso back in the 70s. And that was another place where the who's of who, if you didn't play on that stage, you didn't make it. Bottom line. And you had to have thick skin because the talent on there was incredible. So throughout the years, I knew who Baretto was. I had seen Baretto several times, but in my oldies, as I started getting older, we became a lot closer. We became a lot closer. And those who knew Baretto was not one of these egotistic individuals. He was a gentle giant. He spoke very softly. You know, if you heard Baretto talk in the room, you thought it was a midget because he had a high-pitched voice. He had a high-pitched voice, and when you came out, you said, "Wait, this guy's too big to have a voice like that," you know. But Baretto would not give up his chair to just anyone, as Tito Puente wouldn't either. You know, you had to earn that. And Baretto was the only one in the whole Latin industry or in the music industry in general that always called me by my first name. He always called me Robert. And when he would see me, I was so blessed that he would say, "Hey, Robert, come up and play a little bit." And he would get up and allow me to play in his band with him and jam with him. And I would tell you, if I saw him, let's say hypothetically 10 times he would invite me to play. You know, and for me, I was God sent. And you know, and unfortunately, I'm with Pearl Company, and we were with Pearl. Mark Quiñones, my compadre, and I were with Pearl, and we spoke to Pearl, and we told him, you know what, we need to make a Ray Barretto model, conga. We need to launch a Ray Barretto model for Ray. You know, who else deserves a model? And I have my own model, and I don't deserve it before that man. So we got everything done. Everything was done. The drums are made, beautiful wood drums for him and stuff like that. And unfortunately, we went to NAMM. This was a trade show they do every year in LA. And at NAMM that year was going to be the introduction of the Ray Barretto model. unfortunately, as on our way to NAM to LA, Ray was in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, during that week, I believe it was week or maybe a little after, it was when he passed. He didn't get to see his model,
Oh, wow.
but we still it wasn't launched because we didn't want to launch something that he wasn't here to not only promote but to witness this up. Although I'm sure he's witnesses and thankfully so. I think there's only two sets in the world of those drums, I believe, and his wife Brandy has a set and I have a set.
Wow.
So and I just wish he was here to see it because there's no one that I mean, basically I've been blessed to be surrounded and be in the presence of royalty. When I say royalty, I mean that royalty of the who's of who. Ray Barretto, Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, and not to take it very very far, but Jimmy Morales is right up there with them. And I ask myself every day, what did I do to deserve all that? I thank God for it, but I don't know what I did to deserve it. But I guess I did something right somewhere along the line. And being imperfect people that we are, but it's been given and I thank God for it.
Right. Okay.
So
Wow.
I would like to say in Spanish what Bobby just said, if that's cool. Earl?
Sure.
Okay. Robert, Bobby estaba explicando que ellos son artistas de Pearl, la compañía de instrumentos. Entonces él y su compadre intervinieron para que se le hiciera una serie de congas a Ray Barretto. Estaban en el proceso de finalizarse cuando Ray Barretto entra al hospital. Desafortunadamente, pues todos sabemos el desenlace. Las congas no se llegaron a lanzar porque el NAMM Show que se da en California todos los años, a principios de año, de hecho, que fue cuando Ray Barretto entró al hospital, pues ya estaban me imagino, ¿verdad, Bobby? Porque
Algo así.
hay dos conjuntos de esas congas en el mundo, pues evidentemente Brandy es uno de los conjuntos. Y esas congas no se llegaron a lanzar oficialmente.
Ok.
Gracias, Bobby.
A ti, gracias.
Yo no tenía ese dato, un dato muy interesante.
Gracias.
All right. Now it's time to go to our distinguished guest, Robert Theis. And I would like Robert to tell us what the concept of a miniteca is.
So, ahora vamos a ir con nuestro invitado de honor de la noche, Robert Theis. Eileen tiene curiosidad y pide que por favor definamos cuál es el concepto de miniteca.
¿El concepto de?
Miniteca.
Miniteca.
Ah, en Colombia, miniteca.
Sí.
Miniteca eran esas fiestas muy populares en los años 80 que se hacían en la tarde de los sábados, regularmente sábados o domingos, en las que asistíamos todos los jóvenes de esa generación a bailar y donde no se podía consumir licor, sino únicamente soda o gaseosa, como nosotros la llamamos. Eran unas fiestas en la tarde con unas luces allí y donde se bailaba mucha salsa y merengue, por lo que fueron muy populares en los años 80.
So in the 80s, the teenagers, the younger people that couldn't consume alcohol, only soda pop, would have the parties on Saturdays afternoons. So the same thing that happened in the discotecas or discotheques at night with the adult crowd would be replicated in a younger version without alcohol, but they did play a lot of salsa merengue. And I am going to take a little literary license here. And I'm going to tell you that that's when Robert fell in love with salsa. Le dije que en ese tiempo fue que te enamoraste de la salsa.
Es decir, los adultos iban a la discoteca, los jóvenes íbamos a la miniteca.
Entonces, I must add that Robert was a very famous DJ for the music. He had his band.
Alrighty, I was so fascinated to hear about that because we didn't have those here that I know of. And I understand that one of the stepping stones to get him to where he is now. My next question is also for him. And it is to Robert Theis, with the serious decline in the number of nightclubs that have gone wayside in New York, do you believe that Cali, Colombia is now the salsa capital of the world?
Eileen primero dijo que esta pregunta, o sea, esta aseveración tiene dos partes. Primero dijo que el concepto de la miniteca le fascinó porque no había nada como eso en Estados Unidos y pues desafortunadamente no, el público de este lado no tuvo tanta suerte como ustedes, que se pudieron, como quien dice, estrenar para luego como adultos hacerlo mejor. La segunda parte, ella curiosea en el sentido de que con tanto club nocturno y con tanto, como le decimos, tanto lugar, tanto venue de hacer fiestas, bailes, eventos en Nueva York, en crisis, cerrando, el ambiente muy cambiante. Si eso te llevaría a concluir que hoy día es Cali, Colombia, la capital de la salsa, la capital mundial de la salsa.
Sí, ese es un título que le han dado a Cali, porque pues lo que se vive en Cali es ya algo que casi es único, donde se convive con la salsa casi que 24 horas al día, 7 días a la semana, 365 días al año. Es un fenómeno que se vino dando, yo entiendo que desde mediados de los 90 hacia acá, y han sido precisamente los artistas internacionales los que le han atribuido ese nombre a Cali como capital mundial de la salsa, porque tiene muchas aristas, muchas vertientes. Es los músicos, pero también son las escuelas de baile, pero también es la radio. La sola ciudad de Cali tiene más de 7 estaciones de radio 24 horas. Creo que eso es bien difícil de encontrarlo en otra ciudad. Es los estudiosos, pero también es ese coleccionismo. Casi que en Cali está centrada la memoria de la salsa, con toda esta esfera de distintas vertientes trabajando en el mismo sentido que la salsa. Yo creo que sí, pero no confundamos producir la salsa a consumir la salsa. Yo creo que hay que ser justos en eso, y Cali se gana esa denominación de capital mundial de la salsa por el consumo de la salsa que tiene durante todo el año.
Yo creo, para interrumpir un segundo, yo creo que hay una, y que están un poquito equivocados. Yo creo que antes de los 90, Cali y Colombia en general siempre ha sido el capital de la salsa, porque yo he ido muchas veces. Yo he llegado a Colombia con Rubén Blades, con Willy Colón, con Celia Cruz, con Santiago Cerón. He grabado con Grupo Nietzsche allá también, cuando Jairo Valera estaba vivo. Y ese es un lugar que una fiesta, yo creo, y no le quito nada de Puerto Rico porque donde llevamos, pero yo creo que Puerto Rico le arrancó una página de la Feria de Cali, porque la Feria de Cali es una cosa muy grande. Y cuando yo toqué en la Feria de Cali, te digo honestamente que a mí me dio miedo a ver un millón de personas en un festival. 1 millón de personas.
Wow.
Y eso es muy grande para ver una cosa, para oír una cosa, para verlo es súper impresionante. ¿Tú me entiendes? So, para decirlo de buena forma, yo creo que Cali se merece más crédito de están diciendo de los 90 para acá. Yo creo que era antes de los 90 que empezó la salsa bien fuerte en Cali, así en Buenaventura y todos los lugares demás.
Okay, so after Robert made a distinction between manufacturing salsa and consuming salsa, he thinks that made international artists label Cali the world salsa capital of the world, or the salsa capital of the world, I should say. Bobby Allende added that maybe this label should have starting in the 80s instead of waiting until the 90s, because Bobby Allende has gone to Cali to play with a lot of the royalty of the salsa, as he called them, Willie Colon and all the others that you heard. And he also recorded with Boniche when Jairo Varela was still alive. But somehow the label, the world capital of the world, has started to resonate in the 90s. And that should have started to sound like the capital of the world in the 80s. Robert, Bobby dice que Cali, Colombia, se debió haber comenzado a llamar en la capital mundial de la salsa, no en los 90s, que fue parte de la pregunta que Eileen hizo, sino desde los 80.
Claro, sí, yo entiendo. No entiendo, me refería a que a partir de mitad de los 90 fue que vino esa denominación. Aunque en los 80 estaba Juanchito y todo lo que pasaba con Larry Landa como gran promotor desde Cali, y se consumía y teníamos una feria de Cali muy bien posesionada. En aquella época no se hablaba de la capital mundial de la salsa, me refería a que la denominación empezó a usarse a mediados de los 90 y fue precisamente los artistas internacionales los que empezaron a llamar hacia la ciudad, y eso se ha venido volviendo universal casi, ¿no?
Y gracias a Colombia que nosotros los músicos hemos hecho mucho dinero. Gracias.
Wow. And so, Bobby, I was going to ask you, as a New Yorican, how you feel about what was New York was the undisputed of salsa for so long. And to see that title now being relinquished, how does that make you feel?
Sad, because New York was so. I was having a conversation with one day with Tito Nieves about a year ago, so, and we're texting back and forth, and he says, "Look at this list," and he sent me a list of the clubs we played in the mid '80s, '90s, and stuff, and he stopped at 75 clubs. At 75 clubs. I'm not saying 75 clubs I'm talking about 75 clubs that each of them had their clientele. So it wasn't that, oh, we're going to play over here, maybe the people get there. Each club had their audience, and that were diehards. That was their place, and each place had their clientele. So it wasn't, I'm going to get canceled because there's no people going there. The industry was so big that on 96th Street, you had Broadway 96 in the middle of the block in Broadway, and right on the corner of 95th and Broadway, you had the name escapes me, but there was a club. Ochentas was right on the corner. So, and both clubs on a Saturday were mobbed. You couldn't walk in each club. So the band would literally, there was bands like, let's say hypothetically speaking, Conjunto Clásico would play a set in Broadway 96 and go across the street and play in Ochentas. That's how huge the salsa industry was in New York. Sad in a way, but glad and happy in another that places like Colombia, Peru, Mexico, you know, places like that. You go in Venezuela, you still go to these places, and they still they embrace our music. They embrace our music, and I'm not talking about people 30, 40 and up, and I'm talking about you still see the younger generation, 16, 18-year-olds singing, you know, songs, Tito Nieves songs, Tony Vega songs, you know, songs like that, and that brings me joy. You know, I went to Cuba 4 times in the past 2 years, and I was amazed because over there it made me feel like New York in a sense, because 7 days a week there's music over there, and people are enjoying it 7 days a week. They even have a place that has matinees at 6 in the afternoon, 7 in the afternoon, and then they break it up, and then at 11 o'clock they have another show, and both shows are packed. You know, it's not, and I was like, I mean, on my trip for a week, I went a week at a time each time I went, and I might have slept 4 to 5 hours a day. I kid you not, because it was something to do. It was like, okay, where are we going? We're going here, we're going there, you know. But I do thank, you know, like I said, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, you know, Cuba, and all these places that are, you know, now in Cuba they have the salsa festivals they have there, where we played twice already with my group Otri Mas, which I thank God. Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I am working on a project that I'm very proud of that includes Cuban singers. So it's a project that I'm happy that it's in the process. The wheels are rolling already on it, and I'm just so excited to be putting this together with Mike Blanco, the guy that does the salsa festivals out there. So we're collaborating on this project that I think is going to be really special, and I'm excited, really excited about it.
No, somos tan buenos entrevistadores que a Bobby se le zafó sin querer decirlo que 8 y más está trabajando en un proyecto que incluye cantantes cubanos. Eso se le zafó, pero ya se vale todo.
Exacto, ya un poquito.
Primicia.
Let's point out to our what Bobby Allende said about being at the festival in Cali, where there were 1 million people attending that. That is phenomenal, and I want to make sure that nobody missed that fact.
Mm-hmm. And it's so great because when just the fact of it, it's such a big festival, and I was shocked the way they did it. Is that, like, say I went with Willie Colon, so there's 3 stages in that festival, 3 stages. So you play on one stage for half hour, they put you in a truck in a van, they either back or you walk to the next one, you play half hour there, and you walk to the third one, you play it, and you do that 3 times in a weekend. So you do it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it's the same format, and I think it was an experience, and it was an amazing experience for that matter.
Bobby está hablando de la Feria de Cali, me parece que es la que tiene 1 millón de personas que van a la feria, y está explicando el fenómeno de las 3 tarimas. Toca en una tarima, en media hora tiene que estar en otra tarima, lo llevan en un vehículo o se va caminando hacia la misma tarima, hace lo mismo, luego se baja de la tarima, entonces luego van a la tercera tarima, y ese fenómeno se da viernes, sábado y domingo, con un millón de espectadores.
Seguro, es algo único. Lo que pasa en la Feria de Cali, creo que difícilmente pasará en otra parte del mundo.
Es única, te digo, y gracias a Dios que yo he vivido esa experiencia. Es una que yo creo que todos los músicos mundialmente deben de pasar de una forma a la otra, porque es una cosa muy, muy especial e increíble.
Ronald, since you
Yes.
translated the book, is there anything that you want to add or that we haven't covered yet before we move on?
Okay. I can't really think of anything in particular to add,
Okay.
but personally, one of my favorite things about going through the book, I'll just add a personal comment, was looking through the album covers and also looking at the commentary for the person who made them, Izzy, que me gustó la carátula de los discos y los comentarios de Izzy.
Right, Izzy Sanabria, who had the magazine Latin New York.
Latin New York.
That
yes.
was like the Bible. You know, if you went to New York, you can look in there and see who was playing at what clubs, what days, how much the entrance was, and into everyone. So Izzy has a long history of not only the artistry, but emceeing and knows so much of the history. Now I want to go back to Robert Theis.
You know, before you go on, you know that Latin New York, Izzy Sanabria, every year they had a Latin New York Awards show. Every year as well.
That's right.
It was like the Grammys.
Well,
forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah. Something that you can write about later or do further research. But I wanted to ask Robert. Okay.
I'm sorry. I want to translate for Robert. Que Bobby Allende estaba diciendo que la revista de Izzy Sanabria tenía una edición anual de premios que era como...
Seguro.
He already knew, of course.
Of course.
So to Mr. Diaz, 15 years after Ray Barretto's death, why do you think he is still so revered and admired and emulated? Why do we continue talking about it? What is it about him that keeps him in the forefront of our love for the music?
¿Cuál es la razón por la que Ray Barretto, 15 años después de su muerte, todavía sigue estando vigente? Hay mucha gente que lo admira, que lo imita, que lo tiene de referencia y sigue en la delantera, pues como innovador que fue. Si la gente sigue su estilo y se sigue replicando, a pesar de haber pasado 15 años desde que él ya no está con nosotros, sigue siendo una base de la música.
Así es, de acuerdo. En mi opinión, Ray Barretto es un músico icónico dentro de esta música. Hay algunas características muy especiales en él, que es su trabajo tan destacado en el jazz y luego cómo conecta esto con lo latino. En su caso, a diferencia de otros percusionistas que empezaron fue en lo latino y luego dieron a giro hacia el jazz, pues en Barretto es todo lo contrario. Él viene de trabajar con figuras como Charlie Parker, como Herbie Mann, como Red Garland. Ahí es donde están sus raíces. Luego hace un giro hacia lo latino, ya como miembro de la compañía Tico, luego lo que hizo con la compañía Fania, y termina pues entregado a lo que era, como decía el prologuista del libro, su primer amor, que era el jazz. Entonces yo creo que esas son unas características bien especiales que hacen que Barretto sea distinto dentro de los percusionistas. Pero además, Barretto pasó a ser no solo una influencia para los demás músicos. Acá pues Bobby Allende no me dejará mentir en eso, pero creo que Ray Barretto es el modelo a seguir para los congueros que se dedican a una orquesta de salsa. Más que un referente, más que una influencia, Barretto lo que representa es un modelo a seguir. Y yo creo que todos esos elementos hacen que también como Barretto era fiel a la tradición, le gustaba la música típica cubana, desarrolló un formato de charanga que él denominó la charanga moderna, porque también era un músico vanguardista al mismo tiempo. Entonces yo creo que esa mezcla entre la tradición y la vanguardia hacen que sea un músico único y de ahí que su obra musical se preserve.
His style was very progressive, and unlike most of the musicians that start in salsa and they go to jazz, Barretto was the opposite. He started in jazz to then influence in salsa, but more than a reference, he is an iconic musician who's become the model for all congueros that, or for all percussionists that dedicate themselves to a salsa orchestra or a salsa band. And he was very progressive, and jazz was, like the prologue author said, his first love. So that made Barretto, that set Barretto apart and made him different than most congueros back in the day.
Yes, to add to that, what makes it Baretto, like you said, 15 years later, and people still talk about greatness never dies. That's number one. Greatness never dies. And Baretto, a lot of people don't know. After his death, his passing, we spent quite a few hours at his house, which I got lost over 3 hours finding his house because it was like in the woods somewhere. It was incredible. But Brandy opened the door to us to show us a separate part of the house that Ray Barretto had, where he had wall to wall full of jazz records and a special stereos and special speakers that he would go up there to hear his jazz music. That was his cave. That was his man cave to go and just listen to his music. Reason why Ray Barretto is still being talked about 15 years later, and he'll be talked about 155,000 years later, is because you can be a great musician, but if you don't have soul, that greatness goes. Ray Barretto was a great musician with soul and a signature. Everything starts from the ground up. You have to have a platform. All these musicians that are coming up nowadays, you have to have a starting point. You have to have a point of reference. And who better than point of reference than like Ray Barretto, Mongo Santa Maria, Carl Jada, Willie Bobo, people like that started that you have to start from scratch, from letter A to get to Z, and that's where you start. Do your research. Giovanni is the greatest conga player today, but Giovanni got it from somewhere else also. And he will tell you that himself. The greatness that Giovanni has, that he studied each and every conga, past and present. Every conga player, past and present, he has studied. Giovanni will tell you what year Ray Barretto did what solo, what bar in that record that solo's coming, what lick is coming, and watch out. And Giovanni will tell you what year was done, what conga he used, and he will not only tell you, he would play it for you. That's how much he studied all those masters. I am one, and I say this in the most humble way, I totally hate to be called master. And I know it's a term of respect, but I don't consider myself to be one, because the ones that have passed, those were the true masters. Those are the ones that earned their name. El Rey de la Mano Dura, El Rey de Timbal, la Guarachera del Mundo. All those titles were earned. And those titles, I'm very sorry, and I respect everyone, but no one has the right to have those names ever again, because those names were lived, and there's only one of each. And I say that in the most respectful and humble way. But it's my opinion, totally mine. It can be wrong, but it's my opinion in that aspect. But Ray will live forever. Ray's one of a kind.
Sí, Bobby añadió a lo que dijiste, Robert, que Barretto sigue dando de qué hablar porque la grandeza nunca muere. Y él logró desarrollar su propio sonido. Y que a Bobby no le gusta que lo llame maestro porque esos títulos están tomados. El rey de la mano dura, el rey de la guarachera del mundo. Escuchaste dice, esos títulos ya están tomados y se sabe que lo llamen maestro es un término, un título a modo de respeto, pero que pues a él, en su opinión, que podría estar equivocada, él no dice que sea la única opinión o que sea infalible, pero que él dice que esos títulos ya están tomados. Bobby, te voy a agradecer también que me acabas de acordar algo que no había dicho antes. El texto de contraportada es un texto de la entrevista que yo le hice al Conguero del Mundo, a Giovanni Hidalgo. Le agradezco que me haya dado como 5 días de su vida porque más o menos una semana estuve batallando y hablando y lo que dice Bobby es cierto. Él se acuerda de cada detalle, de cada conjunto de timbas, como él llama a sus tumbadoras, de sus raíces cubanas, estuvo tocando con Baretto, el tiempo que estuvo con Batacumbele. Tú le haces una pregunta y para poder extraer una oración, él puede estar hablándote 3 horas fácil porque es que su experiencia es tan rica. Entonces, él es un mundo de información. So what I'm saying is that to add to what Bobby just said, Bobby Allende reminded me that the back cover text is an interview that I had with Giovanni Hidalgo, the best conguero in the world. And when we closed the interview, he said, "Oh no, I'm not. I'm not the best conguero in the world. That's what they said, but I'm not." So, and to track one sentence of an interview or to answer a question, he had me on the phone 3-5 hours. I talked to Giovanni for about 5 days to produce this right here because he is a world of information. And
he's an encyclopedia.
Yes, he's an encyclopedia. For him to tell you something, he starts, and it's not goes on. He starts describing you the timbas, as he calls the congas or tumbadoras, as we call them. The timbas, the color, where he got them from, or who bought them, and how much they paid for, and how he practiced with David Cuba was El Rey del Timbal, and he fancied himself as Barretto, and he bought these $1 glasses because they use custom clothes. They went to get glasses like Baretto, and they use suits like shiny suits, and the mother, David Cuba's mother, or the aunt, they made special clothes for them to perform on the sidewalk. So he goes and gives you all these details to answer a quick question, a simple fact, but he goes through the entire process.
Exactly.
He's so passionate about it. I mean, you could be listening to him for a month and never be bored. And
exactly.
then he tells you about, how he traveled and how he got hired to do this work. I think I remember he said that he recorded, was already 14 years old. He was being eyed by Palmieri when he was still a kid. So, I mean, Giovanni Hidalgo, I love you. Thank you so much for that interview. And it's right here in the back shoulder of the book.
Yo quisiera agregar un minutico algo. referente a lo que dice Pavi. Y es que me consta porque hace unos años, cuando tuve invitado en mi show a Bobby Allende, cuando le hice la llamada, me colocó solo una condición, y era que durante la entrevista no le llamara maestro, sino que le dijera Bobby. Y eso me demostró a mí que aparte de ser el músico virtuoso que es, y que hay unas grabaciones que evidencian su trabajo, me dejó claro que tiene muy clara su posición dentro de la narrativa de esta música, y eso me llamó mucho la atención. Me costó un poquito de trabajo porque es una muletilla que uso frecuentemente cuando estoy en entrevistas, pero recuerdo muy bien que esa fue la única condición que él me colocó en aquella oportunidad cuando iba a estar en Conversando la Salsa.
Gracias.
So, a while back, when Robert Theis had Bobby Allende as his artist in Conversando la Salsa show that broadcasts in 57 radio stations in Colombia every Thursday, the only condition that Bobby Allende gave Robert Theis to be on the show was that he wouldn't call him maestro or master. So that gives that gave Robert Theis a point of reference and an idea of how grounded Bobby Allende is and his position in the salsa narration.
Okay, I want to share something that I heard Ray Barretto say. The Smithsonian would bring in a lot of salsa artists to perform, but earlier in the mid-afternoon, they would have interviews with the artists. And it was public, it was free, and of course I went to all of them. And Ray Barretto, while he was being interviewed, made this statement that I will never forget. He said, if you want to make $1 million playing song, you have to start with $2 million.
Yeah.
So Eileen trajo a colación en una entrevista que estuvo Ray Barretto en el Smithsonian. Él le dijo a la multitud, y es algo que todavía Eileen recuerda, Ray Barretto dijo que si usted quiere tener $1 millón tocando salsa o tocando en una orquesta, perdón, tiene que comenzar con 2 millones.
Es cierto.
Get that in there. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, he was a
Okay,
classic.
Robert Theis, I want you to please tell us about Ray Barretto's time with Tito Puente, and you could please tell us why he departed. In the book, you make reference to something that touched Ray Barretto's heart that was part of one of the factors leading to him leaving the Tito Puente group.
Eileen pregunta si puedes por favor ampliar un poco sobre el tiempo de Ray Barretto con Tito Puente, y específicamente qué fue lo que le tocó a Ray Barretto el corazón cuando se fue de la banda de Tito Puente.
Ya. Bueno, Ray Barretto llega a la orquesta de Tito Puente luego de haber trabajado con José Curbelo. Ahí es donde se integra a la banda de Tito Puente. Le corresponde una época maravillosa, toda vez que su sonido en la conga quedó registrado en uno de los álbumes históricos del rey del timbal, que es Dance Manía. De acuerdo a mi investigación y a los testimonios que pude recoger con los músicos, ese fue un periodo por un poco más de 4 años. Barretto entra en sustitución de Hugo Santamaría, que había sido su referente. En el libro pueden encontrar un testimonio que recogí de Radio Francia Internacional, cuando Barretto les manifestó que cuando él escuchó en un club tocar a Mongo Santamaría, él sintió que él no servía para esto, porque la conga se escuchaba fuerte y bongo estaba en un big band. Ese es un instrumento que requería una fuerza, era lo que quería decir Barretto. Yo ese testimonio lo recogí dentro de la narrativa y realmente a la conclusión que yo llego dentro de los distintos testimonios de músicos que pude entrevistar para ese segmento de la narrativa de su periodo con la orquesta de Tito Puente, es que fue por un tema de racismo que a Barretto le tocó el corazón y que lo hizo rememorar algo que él ya había vivido años atrás mientras estuvo en Múnich prestando servicio militar obligatorio, en el que, como Barretto decía, el racismo era tal que no se necesitaba ser negro para ser discriminado, sino ser latino, así fuera blanco. Entonces, entiendo que hubo unos shows que se hicieron en la Florida y Tito Puente no llevó a los músicos negros de su orquesta y eso a Barretto le tocó el corazón y eso que luego se retirara de la banda de Tito Puente.
So what he said was that he was with the Tito Puente Orchestra after he played with Curbelo, and he played with Tito Puente. And when he played with Tito Puente, he was already coming thinking that he wasn't good enough as a conguero because he'd taken Mongo Santa Maria as his reference. And that if you could sound that loud, and that you were good enough. And Barretto didn't think he was as good as Mongo Santa Maria. He raised the bar really high. So there were several events that had been contracted to go in Florida to the Tito Puente Orchestra. And to give a little bit of context, Barretto had already been in Munich when he was serving in the military. So at that time, he defined racism as being discriminated against, even if you weren't black, because being a Latino was enough to be discriminated against. And Barretto was being subject of discrimination. He felt, he knew what discrimination was. So when these events happened in Florida and Tito Puente didn't bring to the event the musicians of color or visibly colored, Barretto felt in his heart that he didn't belong, and he felt in his heart as if he had been discriminated against, because Barretto wasn't part of the visibly black musicians that were brought to the event, yet that made him leave the band because he felt very strong against racism and discrimination for reasons of color.
Okay, thank you.
I think
yes, thank you. Bobby, do you feel that the torch...
Excuse me?
Bobby, do you feel that the torch has been passed to you and to other leading congueros? And if so, what do you feel is your responsibility to perpetuate Ray Barretto's legend and his artistry?
Wow. Passing the torch, no, I don't feel that. I don't feel that because there's so much other talent to and I appreciate the comment and I take it wholeheartedly. But it's a big one. It's a big one. And it's one that I don't think I've earned yet because I'm just a pebble in a huge lake, so to say. But as far as up and coming musicians, I think these musicians just need to embrace one another instead of talking about each other. I think that'll get us further. I think that'll get the unity has been, it's so lost. It's sad that the unity is lost, that musicians are knocking off other musicians for the difference of $10, $15, $20 difference. If we don't stop it, we're gonna lose the little bit that we have left. We have to continue just the same way they're saying that salsa is dead. Salsa is not dead. Salsa will never die. Salsa will never die because it's a genre. It's a type of music that's used in all genre. If you listen to hip hop, you listen to reggaeton, you listen to whatever, in some way, shape, or form, they include salsa. You have to just look out for it. You know, you have Cardi B now that's included. I Like It Like That. You know, and these kids nowadays, you tell them, well, yeah, that song, I like it like that. They go, oh, that's Cardi B. No, it's not. You know, no, it's not. Do your research. You know, so that's the thing. That's where unity and intelligence comes into place. And those two things that we have to combine them. We have to bridge all those gaps, because if not, we're going to fall into the gaps further than we already are into it. Unity is so key. Unity and being humble is going to get us we can all be at the same place. You know what? Like the guy said, you know, you're fortunate. No, we're all one and the same. We just have different blessings. We're God's messengers in different forms. You know, one is a doctor, one is a musician, one is a singer. You know, there's a purpose. We're all leased vehicles here, but we're at the end of the day, we're all the same person, because I put my pants on one leg at a time, just as everybody else does. You know, and it's a fact. If you sit back and analyze the facts, you'll realize that with unity and the facts, that we can get much further. You know, like they say, the least words that said are the strongest words. I can tell you, I can fly a plane, but if you put me in the cockpit, that plane is not going anywhere. You know, so unfortunately, in this world that we live in, the gift of gab is damaging. It's damaging because people want to get somewhere, so they think with words, to impress people with words will get them there quicker. Impressing people with words will get you to failure a lot quicker, because then after your words and your lies, now comes a point of proving it and backing up what you said. That's the hard part. But I think we'll be okay. Pandemic is hit. We've all lost a ton of work and everything like that. But at the end of the day, you know what it was? In my opinion, once again, my most humble opinion, it was God's hitting a reset button to remind people who's in charge. I'm going to hit this reset button because you guys have forgotten who's in charge here. You know, and unfortunately, we'll always live the life we live in asking why. We're like 3-year-olds. You know, he's taking all the good ones and all the people with great hearts, Jimmy Morales, Ray Barretto, Tito Puente, all these people that great hearts. And we're like 3-year-olds. We're going to keep going. But why? We're not ever going to have the answers. What I try to do nowadays, and I've learned through my years, is that I've taken death as a blessing because he put those people in our paths to show us something. So that's the way I'm trying to look at it. As hard as it may be, it's easier said than done. There's times that I sit here and I still have a voice message from Jimmy Morales, the last interaction him and I had. You know, I hear it every now and again just to hear his voice. You know, it gives me comfort. It brings me sadness, but at the same time, it brings me comfort. And that's why I've learned. I haven't learned it yet. I'm lying if I say I learned it, but I'm in the process of trying to accept it, to take death as a blessing, you know, and hopefully that'll help us all, you know, understand it. We're never gonna understand. We don't know God's plan. If you tell me God's plan, okay, right, okay. After you tell me God's plan, give me the Mega Million numbers so I can hit Mega Millions tomorrow, then, you know, because it's not gonna happen. You know, it's not gonna happen. But that's my take on that. I hope I answered that in some way, shape, or form.
Eileen le preguntó a Bobby que si él creía que a los congueros de hoy, él incluyéndose en ese grupo, ¿no? De los escogidos que están cargando la antorcha. Bobby dijo que no no se merecía ese oficial todavía, pero voy a agarrar mi licencia literaria de a diario, de decir mi opinión, y yo pienso que sí, ustedes están llevando el balón con ustedes y están llevando pues con gran gallardía, pero sí es cierto que cada uno de ustedes es diferente y cada uno de ustedes le imprime su huella digital al estilo. No todos los congueros tienen un estilo propio, no todos los congueros pueden desarrollar un sonido. Y en ese sentido, tú has logrado eso, igual que Barretto, no suenas como Barretto, pero sí tienes todas las características para sí estar cargando la antorcha o el balón, como digo yo. Por eso fue que se me ocurrió traerte para acá en lugar del maestro Jimmy Morales, que ya no está entre nosotros. Eso yo se lo consulté al autor del libro, a Robert Theis, y él estuvo encantado. Me dijo, perfecto, qué bien. Yo todo lo consulto, ya que estoy tan agradecida de que me haya dado la oportunidad de que le corriera con esa traducción y fuera y le dijera a Ronald, por favor, tengo un trabajo bien especial, trátalo con mucho cariño, y le entregué el libro para traducir, pero sin el permiso de Robert no hubiese traducción. Ahí fue donde todo comenzó y le tengo que agradecer. Así que pues por deferencia pues le tengo que pedir permiso de cada uno de los invitados que cuando le mencioné pues, que estoy sacando la antorcha.
Gracias.
Yes.
Ahora no me va a estar mandando texto a las 2 de la mañana ya.
A las 2:15.
Okay.
¿Te gustó el libro? ¿Te gustó el libro?
Sí, claro. Yes. You guys are doing great
We
jobs.
have
Both.
Thank you.
Right. We have a comment from Lupe Torres, the wonderful and amazing panel in the memory of the Maestro Ray Barretto, and she is going to purchase the book. You know, Earl and I had 5 or 6 songs lined up to discuss, to talk about different periods in Ray's career. And we were going to start with El What. I still think we need to play that, because that was his first hit from 1963, way before you were born, Ronald and Senor Allende.
I was born 2 years after.
Okay, well, yeah, well, anyway, I was a kid then, but I want to hear a little bit of this and just talk about it, because for me, it says a lot about what was going on at that time in our musical history. So can you pull that up, Earl?
Saca lo que tengo encima, que yo no te tengo miedo a ti. Todo el mundo te tiene miedo en La Habana, caballero.
The right one or the wrong one, Eileen?
That's the right one.
Saca lo que tengo encima, que yo no te tengo miedo a ti. Todo el mundo te tiene miedo en La Habana, caballero, pero yo. A mí no me importa que tú tengas 7 pies. ¿Qué es lo que pasa?
All righty, I'd like to hear some comments about that song, what it says to you, Robert Theis, that was going on at that era, that we hear that style of music, and why it becomes a hit, not on only English radio, but to English listeners too.
Robert, Eileen quiere saber qué nos dice ese tema en particular sobre lo que estaba pasando musicalmente en esa era.
El Watusi.
El Watusi, y por qué ese tema se convierte en el hit que se convirtió en ese momento dado.
Bueno, pues estaban pasando bastantes cosas a nivel social, político y cultural en la ciudad de Nueva York. El tema surgió, de acuerdo con lo que pude investigar, luego de un baile que se hizo muy popular en el Palladium, en donde Barretto lo que hizo fue colocarle melodía al baile que hacían con ciertos movimientos muy característicos y acompañándose por las palmas. Pero Watusi pasa a la historia realmente porque Barretto fue el primer artista latino que logró colocar en el año 1963 un tema en el prestigioso listado de Billboard, algo que no es una referencia cualquiera, ¿no? Ya luego vinieron otros, pero Barretto pasa a la historia como el músico que pudo colocar un tema de contenido latino en una lista americana. Y ya sabemos lo que pasó de ahí en adelante. De hecho, le costó mucho trabajo luego a Barretto desligarse del éxito que había logrado con Watusi. Venían producciones y como que ningún tema lograba llegar a tanta relevancia, tanto así que en el 65 volvió a grabar un nuevo Watusi, que no tuvo el mismo impacto, ¿no? Se llamó Watusi 65, pero le costó bastante luego desligarse de semejante hit que había logrado con esa pieza que ahora resulta emblemática.
So in 1963, Barretto becomes the first one to position a song of Latin content in the Billboard in 1963. Then it was very difficult for him to distance himself from that success of the song, and he ended up having to record another Watusi in 1965, which did not have the same results as the 1963. Many others have positioned themselves on the Billboard with songs of Latin content, but Barretto was the first one to get a Latin song on the billboards.
Interesting that it has that charanga feel to it, and that I know Baretto had charanga in his history, but it just always floored me that this was something that Americans liked and gravitated to. Bobby, what are your ideas on that?
Like I said, I think Baretto is just innovative in many different forms, and from my understanding, that was the era where the boogaloo started coming about as well. You know, so and from what I hear, in that era, the boogaloo wasn't accepted as well, because remember back then was a big palladium. The mambo was the thing. You know, the salsa. You know, and big bands, Machito, Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez. So when they started playing the boogaloo, it was like, what the hell is that? What are they playing? You know, they have ruined my music. They've ruined our music, you know, and they had to be accepted. And again, it was just one of the aspects that Ray Barretto had of being the daring one, to be the one to step outside the box and not be concerned about what was going to be said about what his heart felt. In other words, that's what he wanted. What he did was what his heart felt. He got fed up after a while with the salsa music. That's why he left and he went to do Latin jazz, because it was his passion. It was his passion. It's what he wanted to do. It was more of what he knew. It was more what he felt. You know, he felt, I guess I'm speaking out of context, but being an observer, I would think that what he felt was, you know, I did the Latin thing. I did the Fania, you know, which created the biggest buzz in the world. You know, Watusi, Abidjan, those, you know, and you know, all those Salsa Dura records, you know, and you know that he made history. So it's one of these things. So what am I going to do next? That's when I go back to, you can be a great musician, but you have to have his soul. And his soul was telling him, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm feeling. That's when you have a soul. That's when you have a signature. That's when you have a heart to say, I'm going to be daring. I'm going to do what I have to do, you know. And that type of when I hear that type of music that had been recorded before my time, that's what I get. And what I get also is what I'm taking from that also is that the beauty of the music that was created is so lost. Everything is this one thing I do also when I go to record. The first thing I tell the recording engineers is, do me a favor, do not experiment with what my sound is. Don't give me these plugins and all this stuff. And because if I sound horrible, I want the people to know that I sound horrible, because you can't fix me in the studio and I'm going to sound horrible live. That was the beauty of the music back then. What you heard is what you got. You know, what you heard on those recordings, when you heard Chito Puente, when you heard Machito, when you heard Tito Rodriguez, when you heard Baretto, Momo Santa Maria, when you went to see them in the Palladium or wherever, Colgate Gardens or wherever you saw them, you heard what was recorded. Because it was one mic in the middle of the room. If you listen clearly to a lot of those recordings, Willie Colon, Hector Lavoe, all those recordings, you hear mistakes. You hear people talking in the background. You hear the imperfection that made our music perfect. That's what made it. A little bit the dirt and the imperfection. It's what made our music perfect. Now the perfection is making it imperfect. If that makes any sense, you know, you're trying to make something perfect that was not broken. You know, yeah, technology is taking. I mean, look at the technology we're in today. Had we had this back in the day, my God, we wouldn't leave our house because we would have so much to look at 27 hours a day. Let it for 24, you'd have 27 hours a day to look at things and never see something twice. That's how much history that's not recorded, that we have to see with our own eyes and tell stories about it because it's not documented. Unfortunately, because we didn't have the technology of today back then. Had we had that, forget it. We wouldn't be talking because I'd be a genius right about now. You know.
So Bobby
All right,
añadió.
Isa, if you can, like,
I'm sorry.
we're going to be wrapping up soon, so we're going to have you translate that, and then we're going to have to, talking you back another time. So
yes,
please continue.
Okay. Yes. You have his number, right? Robert, lo que añadió Bobby fue que en el caso del el Watusi, y en términos generales, Barretto siempre fue innovador y experimentó con los sonidos de charanga y incluso con el bugalú, a pesar de que los puristas de la salsa y del mambo resistían esa experimentación con los sonidos. ¿Verdad? Te resumí, bien resumido el compendio de lo que acabas de decir, porque nos tenemos que ir al tiempo de traición.
Basically,
Earl, I'll leave it with you, Earl.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Robert Téllez for coming on the show and for all the great work he's been doing. I'd like to thank Mr. Allende for coming on the show. I learned so much about you this last week researching you. I'd like to thank Ronald Vázquez for all his diligent work that he's done on making these things happen. And I'd also like to thank my dear friend Bella Martínez for coming on the show and giving me the opportunity to have this discussion. And also I'd like to give a special clave out to my co-host Eileen Torres. She was fabulous as always. And thank you guys so much. It was a great time. I learned so much, and we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Okay.
Thanks for having me too.
Okay. All right.
Take care.
All right.
Everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.